Hi, my name is Kristin Parker. I am a member of the Ronan Institute, and I want to thank Keith and John for inviting me to participate in this lightning talk. I will introduce my research project called Preserving Cultural Heritage in Times of Crisis, the Role of Social Media. I'll give a little bit of a background, my own personal academic background, and then introduce some of the research concepts as a way to introduce this project. So let me share my screen and we will get started. Bear with me here. Okay. First, a brief personal introduction. I've worked in museums for over a decade, including overseeing collections at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum and the Rose Art Museum at Brandeis University. These days, I oversee the enormous collections of photographs, prints, drawings, sculpture, paintings, musical manuscripts, and more as the lead curator of the arts at Boston Public Library. I'm trained to manage art collections, put together exhibitions, and I support artists in residence. And I've worked with every type of art you can imagine, from ancient funerary sculpture to contemporary digital projection, from 15th century bound manuscripts to sculptures containing horsehair and plastic. I have a dual BA from Hampshire College in anthropology and art history. I'm also an information expert and have a Master of Science in archival management from Simmons College. The other hat I wear is as a cultural defender. I'm a lead trainer in first aid to cultural heritage in times of crisis. This is an emergency response capacity building scheme developed by the International Center for the Study of the Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Property in Rome and the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative. This initiative was created in response to the devastating earthquake in Haiti in 2010. Immediately after the earthquake, while rescuers were still trying to find loved ones buried under the rubble, people gathered in the ruins to sing traditional songs. At this time, I received a phone call from a friend who taught at a film school in Jacmel, Haiti. Could I advise her students how to rescue their equipment and film from under the rubble so they could save their film and continue to make their work even during this horrendous time? How is it possible to safeguard cultural heritage while humanitarian aid and security operations are underway? When is the right time to intervene? Cultural first aid and resilience training equips heritage professionals with necessary skills and knowledge to provide timely response in emergency situations. The training identifies areas of joint programming between the cultural and humanitarian sectors to make certain that affected communities participate in their own recovery. The training is developed from what was learned on the ground in Haiti. And today there are over 75 of us sited in Iraq, Georgia, Serbia, Egypt, Haiti, Africa, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Syria, and elsewhere. I'm often asked, how is it possible to think of artifacts, monuments, or works of art when human lives are at stake? Well, of course, human lives come first, but heritage plays a critical role during a disaster. For communities ripped apart by such catastrophes, cultural heritage has the potential to bridge communal divides and provide a sense of continuity as well as identity during an unfolding humanitarian crisis. For example, a family recipe written on a slip of paper recovered from a home destroyed by floodwaters can act like a life raft for a person who's lost everything. To feel at home is a basic human need, a kind of psychic immune system from which is drawn the strength and resilience necessary to face life, especially during crisis. Like a rock cairn can help keep a hiker from falling off a cliff, providing a connection to home creates a wayfinding sign, enabling emotional reorientation after catastrophe. Those who don't feel at home will be correspondingly compromised. It follows that violent and forced displacement and the strategic destruction of the cultural associations of home is a recognized strategy in war, a means whereby the aggressor demoralizes and makes vulnerable the people it wishes to control. Tragically, genocide and forced displacement is a constant cycle in our world. Remarkably, despite the horrific loss of human lives and cultural heritage, survivors always find a way to commemorate and reconstruct what was lost. It is a vital act to do so. When there's been no choice in the matter of leaving home, the need to remember it becomes paramount. Recalling the sights, sounds, tastes, and the physical atmosphere of a place can give people a path out of the immediate crisis of deprivation. For many who are left bereft from place loss, the dream of home means actual building, manifesting memory into something architectonic, as you can see in this model landscape of Mount Ararat by an Armenian genocide survivor. This phenomena, the recreation of a lost place, is seen again and again during the recovery period after disaster. Precious remnants of a vanished world are reassembled, and memories are indexed through that process of reassembly. There are historical precedents. Survivors of the Armenian genocide compiled memory books documenting life and traditions in villages before they were erased by the Ottoman Empire. These books, originally created as an act of survival, contain vital historic information for researchers, Armenian and non-Armenian, even today. Another example are the Yizkor memorial books created by survivors of the Holocaust. Photographs, illustrations, and maps documenting Jewish communities before the Second World War became a tool through which Jewish life could be reconstructed and recalled. The work was done while memory was fresh, with few resources, and with the knowledge that the survivor communities, such as those in camps for displaced persons, would soon be scattered around the globe in their new countries. These books became a tool for knitting communities back together virtually. During the 1990s, the years of the Bosnian War, displaced survivors used the latest technology available to them, the World Wide Web, to create a digital version of a memory book. Online, village-specific neighborhoods were created through websites that connected people to their homes, documenting exactly the same type of cultural markers that Armenian and Jewish survivors compiled decades before. Here's an example of a hometown website created by Bosnian Muslim refugees, containing collections of personal photographs showing the town and its people before the 1992 ethnic cleansing, which drove over 30,000 residents into exile. Included in another website is a handwritten memory map created by a Muslim refugee that notes all of the residents and the mosque that was blown up in 1992. Today, millions of Syrians who have been forcibly displaced due to war have the same impulse. Those in refugee camps with little access to computers have turned to using local materials to construct their connection to home. Here's an architect in Zatari refugee camp in Jordan, building the ancient city of Palmyra using kebab skewers as a way to teach the children in the camp about their own heritage that they may never get physical access to. Others have the privilege of using social media. Facebook has become a lifeline and a hub to gather people together in a sort of virtual neighborhood. Facebook is the current tool for rebuilding home virtually. In response to the displacement of over half the country since the war began in 2011, multiple Syrian Facebook groups dedicated to local heritage have evolved. Participants are building mass collective scrapbooks, mainly using their own personal photographs or writings to recreate the cultural experiences of their homeland. The ancient and beloved city of Aleppo, a place that has suffered immeasurable destruction, is a particularly important subject for Facebook groups. One group, called Aleppo Neighborhoods and Towns, crowdsources information from participants, asking for news about sites that have likely been impacted by war, or after the well-being about people known in the neighborhood, like a craftsperson or a musician. Facebook group administrators have a role to play in keeping the peace on these sites, which is really interesting. While Facebook is often known for inciting politically charged divisions, groups dedicated to cultural heritage are able to gather people together who may have political differences, but they're able to use heritage as a mediating force. This is an important point. Another excellent example of such a group is called the Encyclopedia of Aleppo Folk Proverbs, a private group with over 50,000 members. This group is a hub of knowledge about life in Aleppo, featuring local heritage that people pine for most, including the simple artifacts and experiences of everyday life. For example, one member posted about a 75-year-old laundry that has survived the war. Other discussion topics include a special headcloth worn by the older men of Aleppo. Sometimes they talk about the different terms for a dustpan. They describe the sensorial memory of a local market. And they have conversations about the use of rattan-covered bottles and the sweet memories of a children's game. Group participants are invited to share memories of the city and traditions specific to Aleppo, including recipes, proverbs, and other cultural traditions. These virtual collections of survivor communities offer a metaphysical archive, creating a dynamic, interactive means of preserving bonds between people. So often in a heritage recovery project, it's the most famous places that are given the most money and attention. Many of you may have heard about when Palmyra was blown up by ISIS or Daesh, but most of us won't know that the loss of a neighborhood movie theater is also collectively mourned as a place that used to bring people together from all walks of life. When it comes to rebuilding the city, knowing how people value such experiences would contribute to a mindful reconstruction effort. These grassroots bottom-up efforts are building a collective knowledge that can be used for policymakers, future researchers, and learners. As an archivist, I know that these digital commemorations found on Facebook are at risk of loss. Unlike printed books, anything created digitally requires ongoing migration plans if you want to preserve it. Paper lasts longer than a DVD, for example. The only way I can reach a small selection of the 1990s Bosnian commemorative websites is through the Wayback Machine, which is a nonprofit web crawler that takes periodic and partial snapshots of web pages. But often the links and the photographs have disappeared from these limited snapshots. As a proprietary company, Facebook has the power to remove content with the click of a button. And in fact, Facebook has censored content related to the war in Syria that they deem too politically charged. I anxiously sought funding to see if I could find a way to address this pressing problem. My fellow Ronin scholars understand the challenge of securing funding as an independent researcher or practitioner. So I was really relieved to discover Ronin and grateful that John encouraged me to become a member, and he gave me the confidence to move forward with the stream. I really couldn't have embarked on this work without the Institute, and for that, I'm very grateful. In 2019, I received a grant from the Modern Endangered Archives program administered by UCLA with the Arcadia Fund to develop best practices for preserving social media content. My co-researcher and thought partner is Al-Hakam Shar, who's seen on the lower right, an academic who leads the Aleppo project, a collaborative initiative that envisions the eventual rebuilding of this incredible city. It's our hope that the information compiled within these Facebook groups, created by former residents with deep local knowledge and community networks, may help inform priorities when recovery and reconstruction is possible, which is a critical element for authentic conflict transformation. We have a technical advisor, Ed Summers from the University of Maryland, who's a software developer, teacher, and researcher working at the intersection of libraries, archives, and the web. Our work includes surveying all of the Aleppian Facebook groups, evaluating the content of the groups through the lens of archival appraisal methods, developing techniques to protect privacy, and experimenting with software techniques to preserve the dynamic interaction, those really beautiful, interesting conversations that take place within the Facebook format. So, through this work, we hope to be good archival ancestors, to preserve the possibility of keeping these grassroots efforts alive for the future, and to protect and carry forward these precious memories and traditions in the name of cultural survival. Thank you so much for having me